I cheated on my husband, and now I've lost everything. They say guilt can eat you alive, but I never truly understood how suffocating it could be until I experienced it firsthand. Now, as I sit here, I can't help but reflect on how one horrible decision destroyed everything. My marriage, my self-worth, my connection to the man I used to call my soulmate. All of it was torn apart by a single betrayal. I'm 30 years old, and I've never felt more isolated. The man who once looked at me as though I were his whole world is now a stranger, and I have no one to blame but myself. It all began during a time when our relationship was already strained, but I couldn't see it at the time. Adam, my husband, the man I thought I knew better than anyone, wasn't the same anymore. We had been married for 5 years, and for the most part, things had been good. But like any couple, we faced challenges. For Adam, it started with work. He had always been the ambitious one, the man who thrived on success and recognition. But over time, the stress from his job started to consume him. He came home exhausted, withdrawn, and no matter how much I tried to offer support, it felt like he was slipping away from me. At first, I told myself it was just a phase. Every relationship has its ups and downs, right? I kept telling myself that I just needed to be patient and give him the space he needed to get back to himself. But after a while, that space felt like a chasm, and I found myself standing on the edge of it, wondering if I'd ever be able to bridge the gap between us again. Our conversations became fewer, and when we did talk, it was often about mundane things: work, bills, what to have for dinner. The passion, the laughter, the warmth we once shared began to fade. Intimacy, which had always been such a natural part of our relationship, became rare and mechanical. I tried to be understanding, but I couldn't ignore the ache of loneliness that began to settle in my chest. I missed the man I had fallen in love with, the man who would send me sweet texts during the day, the one who would pull me close and kiss me for no reason at all. And that's when I started to feel like something was missing, something that no longer existed between us. At first, I tried to talk to Adam about it. I asked him how he was feeling, if everything was okay with his work, if there was anything I could do to help. But each time, he brushed me off, telling me he was fine or that it wasn't a big deal. I understood that he was under a lot of stress, but it didn't change the fact that I felt invisible. It didn't change the fact that I was losing him, and he didn't seem to even notice. That's when the thoughts started to creep in, the kind of thoughts that I knew I shouldn't be having. Maybe I wasn't enough for him anymore. Maybe he didn't find me attractive. Maybe he didn't even love me the way he once had. I tried to bury those feelings, but they kept surfacing. I couldn't shake the sense of emptiness that grew inside me. And that's when I met him. I didn't plan for it to happen. It wasn't like I was looking for someone to replace Adam. But sometimes, when you feel like you're drowning in your own insecurities, it's easy to get swept up in the attention of someone who seems to notice you when no one else does. His name was Jason, and he worked in the same office as me. We had exchanged pleasantries here and there, but it was nothing more than casual small talk. Then, one day, after a particularly hard week, he asked me how I was doing. It wasn't a passing comment like the others, it felt genuine. He really seemed to care. I don't even know why, but that simple question hit me harder than I could have imagined. Jason was different from Adam. Where Adam was reserved and distant, Jason was attentive, charming, and most importantly, he made me feel seen. The first compliment he gave me felt like a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. He told me I looked beautiful, something Adam hadn't said in months. At first, I thought it was just harmless flattery. But then he kept noticing little things: the way I styled my hair, the way I'd laugh at silly jokes. Each time, it felt like he was filling a void that had been growing inside me for so long. The conversation shifted from friendly to flirtatious, and before I knew it, we were exchanging texts outside of work. They started innocently enough, just casual conversation, a few laughs, a couple of shared jokes. But as time passed, the lines blurred. The texts became more personal, more intimate. Jason would send me good morning texts, and I'd reply almost immediately. He'd compliment me again, and I'd thank him, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in ages. And before I knew it, I was caught up in something I never expected. The affair wasn't love, it never was. But in those moments, it felt like something I needed. Jason filled a space that Adam couldn't, and it made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in months. The problem was, the guilt started to creep in almost immediately. Every time Adam came home after a long day, I felt sick to my stomach. The smile on his face when he saw me only reminded me of the betrayal I was hiding. It felt like I was living two separate lives, one with Adam, where I was the wife trying to hold everything together, and another with Jason, where I was someone else, someone who was being seen and appreciated. But that guilt, it was suffocating. Every time Adam kissed me goodnight, I felt like I was lying to him. Every time he asked about my day, I felt like a fraud. I hated myself for doing it, but I couldn't stop. The affair wasn't about love, and I knew it, but I couldn't let go. And then, one night, everything came crashing down. I ended it with Jason. I knew I couldn't keep living this double life. But it wasn't just that. The guilt had become too much to bear. I couldn't continue deceiving Adam, not when I saw the way he looked at me like he was still in love with me, still trying to make things work. So I confessed everything. I told him about Jason, about the texts, about everything. I thought that telling him would make the guilt go away, but instead, it only made things worse. The way Adam looked at me when I confessed it will haunt me forever. He didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations at me. He just looked at me hurt, devastated, broken. The silence between us was unbearable, and in that silence, I realized that everything I had feared had come true. I had destroyed us. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat there, quietly, as the weight of my betrayal crushed him. I begged him not to leave me. I told him we could go to therapy, that we could fix this. I even offered him the one thing I thought would make everything right. I told him he could see other women if that would help him heal. But Adam just shook his head, his voice low and steady. "I don't want revenge," he said. "I just need time." Time. I clung to that word as though it held the answer. I threw myself into trying to be the perfect wife, cooking his favorite meals, leaving notes in his lunchbox, buying lingerie to try to reignite the spark. I did everything I thought would fix what I had broken, but it didn't help. Adam didn't seem to care. He thanked me for my efforts, but it was all so empty. His eyes lacked the warmth they once had. He never told me he loved me. The intimacy was forced, and he never made the first move. 2 weeks ago, Adam started coming home late, sometimes past midnight. He always had an excuse: late meetings, catching up on work, something he needed to do. But I could tell that something was off. His excuses didn't feel real anymore. And one night, I called him when he was out. I could hear a woman laughing in the background. He brushed it off, saying he was with coworkers, but I didn't believe him. The knot in my stomach tightened. Was he seeing someone else? I had no proof, but the doubt gnawed at me, and now I had to face the consequences of my own actions. Had I destroyed everything? Or had he already moved on? A few days ago, a close friend of mine told me something that felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. She had seen Adam in a car with another woman, and from the way she described it, they were not just sitting next to each other. She thought they might have been holding hands. My stomach dropped, and I swear, for a moment, I couldn't breathe. The thought that Adam might have sought comfort in someone else shattered me completely. It was like a flood of emotions rushed through me at once: betrayal, anger, confusion, guilt, but also, strangely, a sense of relief. A twisted part of me thought that maybe I deserved it. Maybe this was karma coming back to teach me a lesson for all the hurt I had caused him. I've always known that Adam and I had our issues, but I never imagined they would push him to this point. I never imagined I would become the person who would drive someone away, someone I loved more than anything. But now, it seemed like it was all coming back to haunt me. Maybe he wanted me to feel what he had felt: the neglect, the emotional distance, the loneliness. Maybe he wanted me to understand the pain he had endured for so long, even though he had never really said a word about it. That night, when Adam came home, I was already on edge. I could barely keep my hands steady, my mind racing 100 miles a minute. My friend's words kept echoing in my head, and I could feel the truth crawling under my skin, making my heart beat faster. I had to confront him. I couldn't keep living in this state of confusion and doubt. So, when Adam walked through the door, I didn't wait. I confronted him about everything: the late nights, the whispers of a woman's laugh I had heard on the phone, the woman my friend had seen him with in the car. At first, Adam tried to deflect. He tried to act like it was no big deal, like it was nothing. He said it wasn't what I thought, that I was just jumping to conclusions. But I wasn't convinced. My instincts were screaming at me, telling me that something wasn't right. So I pressed him, refusing to let it go. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the truth came out. "Yes, I've been talking to another woman," he said, his voice calm but distant, almost cold. "But it's not what you think. We haven't done anything." I felt the floor drop beneath me again. I could hardly process his words. Talking to another woman? What did that even mean? Was he just seeking attention? Or was this the beginning of something more? My mind spun with questions and fears. I needed to know more, so I asked him about the woman in the car, the woman my friend had seen him with. Adam hesitated for a long moment, as if deciding whether or not to tell me the truth. Finally, he spoke, his words sharp and cold. "That wasn't her," he said. "It was someone else from work." His words cut into me. It was like a knife had been driven into my chest. He had been talking to someone else, and I couldn't even make sense of why. How had I missed this? How had I let it get to this point? He went on to explain that he had been talking to this woman for emotional support. She had been kind to him, understanding, and patient when he had been feeling lost, something I hadn't done. "I wanted you to understand how much it hurts," he said, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "To feel neglected, to feel invisible, to feel like the person you love doesn't see you anymore." Those words struck me harder than anything he had ever said before. The truth of it hit me like a ton of bricks. How had I not seen this? How had I let him get to a place where he needed to seek comfort from someone else? I tried to explain, tried to tell him that I never meant to neglect him, that I never meant to make him feel that way. But my words felt hollow in the face of the reality he had just laid bare. "You don't understand," he said, shaking his head. "That's the problem. You never did. You think just saying it wasn't intentional makes it okay, but it doesn't." I was crushed. I could see the pain in his eyes, the rawness of his emotions. I could feel it in my bones. I begged him to stay, to give us another chance. "Please," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "We can go to counseling. We can work through this. We can fix it, Adam. We can fix us." His face was unreadable, but his words were clear. "We can go to counseling," he said, his voice steady but cold. "But not for the marriage. For ourselves. I don't hate you, but the woman I loved is gone." Those words hit me harder than any accusation or insult. The woman he loved was gone. It wasn't just about the infidelity or the neglect, it was about everything I had done to change who we were, to change what we had. And I had no one to blame but myself. I broke down completely then, my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. I begged him not to leave. "Please," I cried, "don't go. We can fix this. Please don't leave me. I love you. I need you." But Adam stayed calm, almost detached, as if he had already made up his mind. "I've made my decision," he said simply, his voice almost flat. 2 weeks ago, Adam packed his things and moved out. He said he was staying with a friend, or maybe someone else, honestly. I didn't know, and I couldn't bring myself to ask. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. At first, I told myself this was just a temporary separation, that he would come back once he had some space, once he had time to think. I held on to that hope, clinging to it like a lifeline. But today, when I opened the door to find him standing there, holding divorce papers, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me once again. The finality of it hit me like a ton of bricks. He was really gone. There was no turning back now. There was no fixing this. He was done, and so was our marriage. Adam told me that I could keep the house, as long as I didn't make the divorce process difficult. But then he added a warning, one that shook me to my core. "If you cause any problems, I'll have no choice but to expose your infidelity to everyone," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I had no idea how we had gotten to this point, how everything had gone so wrong. I had spent months, years building a life with him, and now it was all crumbling around me. I'm left alone now, in the home we once shared, surrounded by reminders of everything we had and everything I lost. His favorite mug still sits on the counter. The smell of his cologne still lingers on the couch, and the pictures on the walls show us laughing and smiling, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing beneath the surface. I feel empty, like a shell of the person I used to be. I'm going through the motions of daily life, but nothing feels real anymore. Nothing feels right. I've spent so many nights lying awake, replaying everything in my mind, trying to figure out where I went wrong. Where did it all fall apart? Was there a moment when I could have changed things? A choice I could have made differently? Maybe I could have prevented this. Maybe if I had just been more attentive, more understanding, maybe none of this would have happened. But I'll never know. And that's the hardest part of all. I know I hurt Adam deeply, and I'll carry that guilt with me for the rest of my life. But I can't help but feel like I've been punished 100-fold for my mistake. I loved him. I still love him, and I thought that love could overcome anything. But I was wrong. Adam used to be so open with me. He wasn't afraid to show his emotions, to share his heart. But over time, I took that for granted. I neglected him, emotionally withdrew from him, and by doing so, I destroyed the very thing that had made our relationship so special. I turned him into someone who now hides his feelings, who keeps everything locked away behind a wall. The last thing he said to me before he left is something I'll never forget. "I don't hate you," he said quietly, "but I can't love you anymore." Those words cut deeper than anything else ever could. More than any argument or betrayal, they marked the end of something beautiful, something irreplaceable. And now, as I sit alone in the house that once felt like home, I realize the full weight of what I've lost. Adam was my rock, my partner, my best friend. And I betrayed him. In doing so, I betrayed myself. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that trust is fragile. It takes years to build, but only seconds to shatter. And once it's broken, no amount of love, effort, or regret can put it back together the way it was. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I'll carry this regret with me for the rest of my life. And I don't think I'll ever be the same person again. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, or if you've ever been through something similar, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this. Your support means the world to me, and it helps us grow together. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care, and remember, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone.